Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we take the source material you share with us, the articles, the research papers, the personal notes, and we strip away the noise to figure out exactly what you need to know, giving you the shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're diving into a topic that is so simple on the surface, but wow, is it complex in practice? Unlocking your voice in English.
It really is the ultimate linguistic puzzle, isn't it? We see it everywhere. University campuses, multinational boardrooms, everywhere. You have two people, they've spent the exact same amount of time studying, they have, basically identical vocabulary and grammar knowledge, and yet their impact when they communicate, it's profoundly different. One person just captures the room and the other just seems to fade away.
I have seen this happen so many times. I've watched brilliant students, people with, impeccable research skills, high technical knowledge, and they completely freeze up when they're asked to just summarize their findings in English. And then you'll see someone else with far less formal training. Maybe they have a heavy accent. They make some basic grammar mistakes, but they're dynamic, they're engaging, and they somehow always get their point across. What is that differentiator? What is the core thing?
Well, our sources are pretty unanimous on this. The secret ingredient is confidence. It is this invisible force that just changes everything. And look, we're not talking about arrogance. That's not it at all. We're talking about self-assurance right in that moment of communication.
Okay, so it's a psychological state.
Exactly. And it doesn't just shape how you feel about your English. It fundamentally reshapes your actual vocal delivery, your pacing, your choice of words, your body language, and I think this is the most important part, your basic willingness to even communicate at all. It's the difference between speaking up and just staying silent.
So our mission today is, I guess, pretty ambitious. We're going to analyze the psychology, but also the practical realities of confidence in spoken English. We really want to understand how this internal feeling actually physically changes your speech, what people hear and see, and then we're going to provide a really detailed, actionable toolkit. Strategies you can implement, right now to build that self-assurance.
We're looking for those aha moments, those little shifts that let you stop seeing English as a test you might fail and start seeing it as a powerful tool you can actually wield. And the one foundational truth we want you to hold on to through this whole deep dive is this: confidence is the key. It's the key that unlocks your true communicative power, even if your English is, imperfect right now. Imperfect confidence is just infinitely more valuable than locked away perfection.
Okay, let's unpack that. That's the core argument in our first section, the hidden power of confidence and why it outweighs perfection. For years, I think the language learning industry and definitely our school systems have sort of conditioned us to chase perfect English, right? Flawless grammar, this massive encyclopedic vocabulary, and only then are you allowed to speak confidently. But all the source material we looked at suggests that confidence is what actually delivers the communicative power in the real world.
That is the crucial disconnect. It really is. If you ask language learners what their biggest goal is, they almost always say things like, I need more vocabulary, or I need better grammar. They're focused on the tool itself.
That's hardware.
The hardware, exactly. But what practical experience and all the research shows is that those tools are useless if you're afraid to pick them up. Confidence is the operating system that actually runs the linguistic hardware.
And that brings us right to this first function of confidence, which the sources call the unlocking mechanism. Just think about all the vocabulary, all the grammar rules you've absorbed through years of study. It's all tucked away in there. But if nervousness takes over in that moment of truth, say you're asked a sudden question in a meeting, all of that knowledge just stays locked behind this psychological wall.
That's it exactly. When you feel high anxiety, your brain's amygdala, which is the fear center, it basically goes on high alert. It signals a threat. And in that state, your cognitive load just spikes. And the parts of your brain that are responsible for complex, spontaneous tasks like accessing vocabulary and applying grammar rules in real time, they're temporarily suppressed.
So the knowledge is still there.
The knowledge is there, but the neural pathway is jammed by stress. Confidence acts like a mental key. It reduces that anxiety, it lowers the cognitive load, and it instantly frees up years of accumulated knowledge for you to actually use.
It's almost a physical thing you can feel happening. The block just dissolves. But here's where it gets really interesting for me, how confidence shapes perception. Our sources mention several fascinating sociolinguistic studies on listener bias.
Yes. And what these studies consistently show is that we as listeners judge speakers more by their self-assurance, by how they sound, than by their strict grammatical accuracy. I mean, they even quantify it. A speaker with, say, 80% grammatical accuracy, but 90% assurance in their delivery. They are frequently rated as more fluent, more knowledgeable, even more trustworthy than a speaker who gets 95% accuracy but presents with only 50% assurance, constantly hesitating or mumbling.
Okay, hold on. Let me just dig into that, because that is a massive takeaway. That suggests the words themselves are less important than the delivery of the words. Why? Why does our brain prioritize the confidence factor?
Because confidence signals competence and control. It's a subconscious shortcut. When a speaker sounds assured, even if they make a small mistake, they maintain eye contact, their tone is clear, they recover quickly, and that delivery communicates, I know what I'm talking about, and this little slip doesn't derail my overall message. So the listener just intuitively trusts the speaker who sounds in command of the situation, even if their language isn't perfect.
Whereas the anxious delivery,
low volume, halting pace, it signals a lack of conviction. So the listener starts to subconsciously question the competence of the speaker, even if the information is perfectly correct.
It's this powerful perception trick. And that creates a kind of flywheel, doesn't it? It fuels more growth.
Precisely. Every single speaker, native or not, makes mistakes. That's just a universal fact of communication. But confidence determines your reaction to that mistake. Competent speakers, they see an error not as a failure, but as data. It's a chance to clarify, to rephrase, or just learn the correct structure for next time. They have this linguistic resilience. They don't retreat. They just push through, and that drives continuous improvement because they're always practicing.
So if confidence is that crucial, let's look at the flip side, the psychology of silence. Why does speaking a second language, especially English, feel so loaded with emotional weight for so many people?
Well, we have to recognize that speaking is deeply tied to our self-image, our emotional identity, our social dynamics. For a lot of learners, the moment they have to speak English, they're tapping into these really deep-seated memories. Maybe it was a teacher who mocked them, or really high parental expectations, or just that immediate, terrifying possibility of public embarrassment.
The fear that, I think you're right, silences more voices than complex grammar rules ever could. What if I make a mistake and people laugh?
That primal fear of judgment is incredibly powerful. I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint, being rejected by the group, being embarrassed in public, that carried massive survival penalties. And even though those penalties don't exist today, our nervous system still reacts to that social pressure as if it's a physical threat. That's why your heart pounds, your palms sweat, your mouth goes dry right before you have to present. It's the fight or flight response hijacking your ability to speak.
So the knowledge gets locked away because your body is literally preparing to run, not to have a conversation.
Exactly. And we need to reframe this for you, for the listener. Confidence is not this all or nothing thing. It's a trainable skill. It's a muscle. And one powerful technique is what psychologists call cognitive reappraisal, basically. Reframing that intense nervousness, that physical feeling of anxiety, not as dread, but as high-level excitement. You're not terrified. You're just highly energized for a big moment.
And the simplest reframing is just realizing that listeners are generally sympathetic, right? If I'm in a meeting and someone is struggling to express a complex idea in their second language, I'm not focused on their grammar. I'm leaning in, trying to understand the idea.
Precisely. Once you push through that initial awkwardness, you realize that listeners are rarely scrutinizing your verb tenses. They're focused on your core message. And once you prove to yourself, through trying again and again, that the world doesn't end when you make an error, that neurological link between speaking and fear starts to weaken.
And finally, let's just bust this myth that only English learners struggle with this. Confidence is a practice skill. You're not born with it.
This is such a critical point. It helps normalize the whole experience. We often assume native speakers are just naturally great communicators, but that is simply not true. I mean, there are huge industries dedicated to helping native English speakers manage stage fright or ace job interviews or navigate tough conversations. If highly proficient native speakers have to practice confidence in public speaking, then non-native speakers should see it as a separate skill to master. It's an interpersonal skill, just like pronunciation.
That sets the psychological stage so well. Now let's move into section 2, and we're transitioning from the why of confidence to the how. The concrete, observable ways that confidence physically alters your speech. These are the 5 changes that every listener can actually analyze in themselves.
Right. These are the tangible signals you're sending out. We're moving beyond just the internal feeling and looking at how confidence manifests in the physics of sound and motion.
Let's start with change number 1, your voice. This is volume, tone, and clarity. When you feel self-assured, the physical mechanism of your voice literally changes.
It does. A confident speaker uses the full capacity of their voice. They tend to project a stronger, steadier, and clearer voice. Why? Because their breathing is deeper and more controlled. When you're anxious, your throat muscles tense up. It's a protective reflex, and your breathing becomes shallow and quick. This inevitably results in a thinner sound. It often causes you to mumble or speak too quietly or rush your words because you're literally running out of breath, all of which makes you incredibly hard to understand.
I noticed that about myself when I was learning German. When I got nervous, my pitch would go way higher and my voice would crack a little, which just made me even more embarrassed.
That high pitch is a classic sign of a tight larynx caused by stress. Confident speakers, on the other hand, allow their pitch to vary naturally. This is intonation, and that adds melody and emphasis to their words, making the speech way more engaging. They also use natural pauses effectively, not because they're lost, but because they're breathing and structuring their thoughts.
So for the listener who is hearing this and thinking, yes, that's me, we have a concrete, try this exercise that the sources recommend.
We do. Take the exact same sentence. Something simple like, I believe the report clearly highlights the need for immediate action. Record yourself saying it when you're feeling really energized and confident. Maybe right after you got some good news. Then immediately record it again, but this time, intentionally put yourself in an anxious state. Slump your shoulders, look at the floor, imagine an angry boss is listening to you.
And then just listen to the 2 recordings back to back. The difference is undeniable. You'll hear it in the pitch, the projection, the pacing. That exercise proves that improving your voice isn't about vocal cord training. It's about managing your mental state.
Now, change number 2. Choice of words and expressions. Confidence is like a linguistic freedom pass. It frees up your creativity.
Right. If you're not terrified of making a mistake, you become a linguistic risk taker. You'll be willing to try out that complicated phrasal verb you just learned, or use an idiom that fits the moment, or even make a joke. You adapt your style.
Yes. Unconfident speakers, by contrast, are paralyzed by the fear of being wrong. They rigidly stick to the basic, safe vocabulary that they know is 100% correct. But those words are often simplistic, and they fail to really express the complexity of their idea. They just safety over nuance. They often just go silent when a more sophisticated phrase is needed because they won't risk the misstep.
Okay, change number 3 is about speed, rhythm, and fluency. And this is a big one because so many learners think fluency means speaking fast.
And that's often counterproductive. Worrying about perfection is a huge cognitive drain. When your brain is busy self-correcting and editing, your delivery becomes slow, choppy, and tense. You're speaking to satisfy this internal editor, not to connect with your audience.
I have a question here, based on a critique I've heard. I always thought fillers like were unprofessional, a sign of poor fluency. But the sources seem to suggest confident speakers use them effectively. How do we square that?
That's a great question. The difference is in the type of filler and its function. Unconfident speakers often use these long, disruptive fillers like, aha, because they're genuinely freezing up, unable to retrieve the next word. It breaks the flow. Confident speakers, however, use brief, natural fillers or transitional pauses, a short, well, or let me see, or a momentary, and it functions as a signal to the listener. It says, I'm actively constructing a thoughtful response. Just hold on.
So it signals thinking, not freezing.
Yeah.
It maintains the conversational rhythm.
Precisely. And confident speakers, they maintain that rhythm. When they do make a mistake, they recover quickly and smoothly, often with a simple rephrase like, the timeline for Q4 will need some adjustments. They keep the flow moving. An unconfident speaker gets completely stuck on that mistake, or they stop talking altogether.
Okay, change number 4 is nonverbal communication. The sources are so emphatic about this. The message is often sent more powerfully by what you don't say.
Oh, body language and facial expressions are massive. Some estimates suggest that up to 70% of how our communication is judged is based on nonverbal cues. That means your words might only be 30% of the battle. Confident speakers use open body language. They use gestures to emphasize key points, they maintain eye contact, and they smile. It projects warmth and openness.
So if I walk into a presentation and I'm slouched over, avoiding eye contact and fidgeting, my message is already dead in the water, even if my grammar is perfect. My body is screaming anxiety before my mouth even opens.
Absolutely. The body confirms or denies the words, and this applies even when people can't see you. Even on the phone or a video call, a confident tone, which comes from that inner assurance and deep breathing, it projects warmth and reliability. You just sound more in control.
And finally, change number 5 is the ultimate tell: how you handle mistakes. This is a clear sign of assurance.
A truly confident person understands that mistakes are just speed bumps, they're not crashes. When they slick up, they don't treat it like a catastrophe. Instead of freezing or apologizing over and over and derailing the whole conversation, confident people usually just laugh it off or smoothly rephrase the sentence without drawing a bunch of attention to the error.
That recovery mechanism is everything. It shows that their main goal is delivering the message, not preserving some facade of being flawless. We've talked about what confidence looks like on the outside, but how do we make it stick? Our sources say that the very act of speaking successfully actually feeds back into our self-belief. It creates what they call the positive cycle or the confidence loop.
This is where the magic really happens. Confidence is recursive. Speaking well builds confidence, and that confidence enables better, more adventurous speaking, which leads to more success and even more confidence. But the critical piece here is that the loop requires you to push yourself into real, unscripted conversations.
Okay, let's detail the 4 steps of this cycle, because knowing the mechanics makes it easier to actually do. Step 1 is try. Even if your attempt is imperfect, clumsy, hesitant, you just have to try. This is the hardest step.
Step 2 is receive feedback. And this is crucial. In real life, this feedback is overwhelmingly positive or neutral. The listener smiles, they nod, they respond to the content of what you said. They prove that the world didn't end because you used the wrong preposition.
Which leads to step 3, learn. Through that successful interaction, your brain realizes that the intense emotional alarm it felt was way out of proportion to what actually happened. You learn that mistakes are not disasters. And your brain gets a little positive reward, a little dopamine hit, which reinforces the behavior.
And that takes you to step 4, grow. Because your brain got a reward and the threat level dropped, you feel more comfortable and much more willing to speak again in the future. It's often unconscious growth, but it solidifies that self-belief, making the next try easier and better. This is how the confidence muscle gets built, not in a textbook, but through successful social interaction.
This just highlights why studying in isolation can only take you so far. The loop requires pushing past that discomfort and using English in the messy real world.
Right. And to connect this theory to some human reality, let's look at 3 inspiring transformations that were highlighted in our sources.
Okay, story 1 is Lena, the silent student. She had the knowledge, but was just crippled by self-doubt.
Lena is a classic case. She grew up in a country with great English education, had good technical skills, but her self-doubt was paralyzing. She moves to an English-speaking country and realizes her excellent grammar is useless if she can't even order a coffee. Her barrier was the absolute terror of being laughed at.
And her breakthrough strategy, which I love, was to actively test that fear. She started making errors on purpose in low-stakes situations.
Yes, talking to a grocery clerk, asking a neighbor a simple question. She would intentionally mix up her tenses or use the wrong article just to see what would happen. And she was genuinely shocked that people either didn't notice, didn't care, or just gently corrected her and moved on. That experience just broke the psychological link in her brain between speaking and shame.
So her confidence came from facing the fear, not from memorizing more grammar rules.
Exactly. Now, story 2 is Rahul, the perfectionist professional. This speaks to the high-stakes corporate world and the fear of having a non-native accent.
Right. Rahul was a brilliant engineer, superior technical knowledge, but he was so afraid of his South Asian accent sounding unprofessional that he avoided all presentations, all client meetings. He truly believed his accent made him sound less intelligent.
Which is such a common and destructive belief. His mentor's intervention was brilliant. They challenged Rahul to focus only on clarity, articulation, pacing, projection, and to stop trying to erase his accent. He did dozens of self-recordings and got supportive feedback focused on connection, not phonetics.
And that process helped him shift his whole perspective. He started to own his voice. And the amazing thing was, he started getting compliments from international colleagues, specifically for the authenticity and warmth of his communication. He realized his accent wasn't a flaw. It was part of his identity.
And finally, story 3 is Maria, the mother. Her journey highlights the power of external motivation.
Maria needed English for her kids, to talk to their school, to navigate her new community. Her turning point wasn't some test. It was a parent-teacher meeting. She felt incredibly self-conscious. She fumbled through a sentence about homework, and she felt herself blushing.
But the teacher's response was simple and so genuine. She didn't correct Maria's grammar. She just thanked Maria for trying and for making the effort to connect. That single interaction was monumental. It showed Maria that her willingness to engage mattered so much more than her perfect word choice.
And now she's helping other mothers find their voice. These stories all prove that the breakthrough moment is always psychological. It's about facing the fear. Okay, we have established the why and the how. Now let's get into section 4. Practical strategies for building your voice. This is the actionable toolkit for you, the listener, specific things you can do immediately.
And we have to start where the problem begins, in the mind. It requires a fundamental shift in your cognitive programming.
Strategy 1. Reframe your mindset. The goal has to shift from chasing this impossible, anxiety-inducing perfection to aiming for genuine, functional connection.
The core mantra here is so important. Communication, not perfection. You have to internalize that the whole reason you're opening your mouth is to share ideas or feelings. You're not there to demonstrate flawless grammar for some invisible judge. Once you prioritize connecting with the person in front of you, that immense pressure to perform just, it lessens immediately.
Strategy 2. Set micro goals and celebrate progress. When the big goal is just fluency, it feels impossible. You need waypoints.
You do. Set small, specific, achievable targets. And they have to be focused on behavior, not some vague outcome. So instead of, I will speak better this week, try something like, in today's meeting, I will ask 2 clarifying questions. Or, this week, I will initiate 1 conversation with a colleague. Or even, I will maintain eye contact for 10 seconds in my next conversation.
And here's the crucial part that people always skip.
Yeah.
You must celebrate every little achievement. Did you ask those 2 questions, even if you stammered a bit? Celebrate it. Did you start that awkward conversation and survive? Celebrate it. That's the positive reinforcement your brain needs to confirm that this new, scary behavior is worth doing again.
Strategy 3 is all about making your practice realistic. Reading aloud is useful, sure, but real confidence is built by interacting with real people, with all the unpredictability that comes with that.
So we recommend actively seeking out conversation clubs, either locally or online. The key is that the focus has to be on practical speaking, on discussion, not on a textbook. You need the flow of a real human conversation where you have to think on your feet.
And similarly, find language partners. A one-on-one exchange is the ultimate safe space to try and fail. These partners are usually super supportive because they're on the same journey, often learning your native language in return. There's a shared vulnerability there that builds trust really quickly.
Strategy 4. Embrace mistakes as friends. This is a tough mental shift, but it's so necessary.
You have to change your internal story. Making mistakes is not evidence that you're failing. It is powerful evidence that you are learning and pushing your boundaries. If you aren't making errors, you're just staying in your comfort zone and you're not growing. And honestly, most listeners won't even notice your minor mistakes, and they almost always respect the courage it takes to speak up in another language.
Strategy 5. Visualization and role-playing. This is a technique that elite athletes and surgeons use, and it's just as powerful for language.
It works because your brain can't easily tell the difference between a vividly imagined event and a real one. Before a big conversation or a presentation, spend 5 minutes just visualizing the whole thing. Picture yourself standing confidently, speaking clearly, making your point successfully. Focus on the sensory details. The feeling of the chair, the friendly look on the other person's face.
You're basically building the memory pathways for success before the event even happens. You're preloading it.
Strategy 6. Record and review your voice. I know, this is the one everyone hates. Hearing your own voice is awkward for anyone.
It might be painful at first, but the payoff is huge. Reviewing recordings helps you objectively identify your strengths. Maybe your tone is great, or you had moments of fluency you didn't even notice, and also your weaknesses. Listen for pacing and volume and clarity, not just grammar. If your volume drops when you get nervous, you know exactly what to work on.
And finally, strategy 7. Seek out supportive communities. Your environment is a massive factor in your success.
You have to be intentional about surrounding yourself with people who offer constructive feedback and encouragement. If you're in an environment, a class, a job, a friend group, where you feel mocked or shut down, you have to recognize that that environment is toxic to your growth. You deserve to be in a space that celebrates your effort. All right, let's move into section 5, where we take this internal confidence and we translate it into external success by navigating the real world and overcoming the most common barriers. This is all about context.
Let's start with the highest stakes environment for most people, the workplace.
Confident English isn't just about sounding smart, right? It smooths collaboration. It accelerates your career.
It's a massive opportunity booster. If you speak up clearly, you stand out in meetings, you're more likely to be given leadership tasks, and crucially, you can advocate for yourself, for a raise, a promotion, for resources, with much greater authority.
So what's a practical tip for the workplace?
Preparation is key. Don't go into a high-anxiety meeting just hoping for the best. Prepare some key phrases ahead of time. For example, learn a phrase for polite interruption, like, if I could just jump in quickly with one thought. Or for confidently correcting a misunderstanding, like, just to clarify my previous point. Having those ready reduces the panic of on-the-spot improvisation.
Beyond the office, confidence totally changes traveling and socializing.
This is where confidence directly creates memories. Confidence is what lets you ask a stranger for directions, or handle a misunderstanding at the train station, or make new friends. The sources noted that travelers who speak up, even with broken English, they just learn more, they get better service, and they make the connections they were hoping for. Silence closes the world off. Speaking opens it up.
In an academic setting, same principle. Ideas are the currency, confidence is the delivery truck.
Exactly. Whether it's presentations or class discussions, teachers prioritize students who are willing to voice their ideas. They value effort and intellectual curiosity far more than perfect grammar on the spot.
Even in our remote world, online communication demands this kind of self-assurance.
Absolutely. From writing clear, assertive emails to actually speaking up in a video conference, your digital English voice matters. Confident speakers are direct in their writing, and they make sure their physical presence, like eye contact with the camera, supports what they're saying on calls.
Okay, let's pivot to overcoming the big barriers that stop people cold, starting with the number one hurdle, fear of judgment.
First, we have to just acknowledge the feeling. It's almost universal. But then we have to challenge the assumption that judgment is constant. The reality is most listeners are focused on their own thoughts on understanding you or on what they're going to say next. They are not actively picking apart your grammar.
The action item is to internalize this. Listeners are usually rooting for you. They respect the effort.
Barrier 2 is negative self-talk, that little internal voice that sabotages you.
You have to challenge that "I can't" or "I sound stupid" voice. It's a technique called thought stopping. When that internal script starts, you actively interrupt it. And you replace it with a constructive mantra. I'm learning. I get better with every conversation. My goal is connection.
And finally, barrier 3, cultural differences. We have to recognize that what confidence looks like varies dramatically across cultures.
This is so important for international professionals. What looks like confident and assertive in, say, the United States might be perceived as rude or aggressive in a high-context culture like Japan.
The advice here is to adapt your approach while retaining your authenticity. In one culture, confidence might mean speaking up first. In another, it means asking a really thoughtful question after others have spoken. Pay attention to the nonverbal cues you're getting from the listener and calibrate.
To wrap this section up, let's offer some immediate, high-impact expert tips that anyone can use right now.
First, learn to pause. This is the most counterintuitive advice for anxious speakers because they just want to rush and get the spotlight off of them.
But pausing isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of composure. A deliberate pause shows the listener you're considering your words carefully, and it gives your brain a second to actually formulate a good thought.
Second, ask questions. This is a brilliant strategic tactic. It signals engagement, and it buys you time.
Right. Asking a good Trojan shifts the burden of speaking for a moment, and it lets your brain process and plan what you want to say next. It positions you as an engaged participant, even when you're speaking less.
Third, be curious.
The more you explore different topics, the more comfortable you become. Curiosity automatically forces you to engage with new vocabulary, which naturally builds your self-assurance.
And finally, we strongly recommend structured practice, like in public speaking groups.
Organizations like Toastmasters are great because they provide a safe, structured forum for practice with feedback. You get low-stakes criticism on your delivery and pacing, which can accelerate confidence much faster than just social interaction alone. And that brings us to the conclusion of this deep dive, which has covered a huge amount of ground from the neurology of hesitation right into the practical application of building self-assurance.
The main synthesis we want you to leave with is this. Learning to speak English confidently is not about achieving some abstract theoretical perfection. It's not about erasing your unique accent or mimicking native slang. It is about finding the courage and the composure to express your authentic self and genuinely connect with the people around you.
Every mistake, every awkward moment is simply evidence that you are trying, you are learning, and you're succeeding in the core mission of communication. You are making progress.
Confidence in this context is really both the starting line and the finish line. It helps you begin the conversation, and it grows stronger and more resilient the more you use it. It's a skill that just compounds over time.
So the next time you hesitate, the next time that internal editor tells you to stay quiet, remember the simple truth. Your voice deserves to be heard. Speak up, mess up, laugh, correct yourself, and just try again. The people around you are listening to your ideas, and we are cheering you on.
We talked today about starting today. Now for the final provocative thought. Confidence isn't something you have. It's something you build, brick by brick. What is the very first brick you'll lay today? Will you focus on strategy 2 and set one specific micro goal for your next meeting? Will you try strategy 5 and visualize a successful outcome for that difficult phone call you have tomorrow? Or will you take the bold step of finding a supportive language partner? Choose one thing, start small, and speak boldly.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the place where we take complex piles of information and turn them into immediate insight.
We're here to help you get well-informed fast.
And today, we are tackling a fundamental bottleneck. Something that trips up even the most diligent, hardworking students.
That bottleneck is your emotional state. We're diving into a subject that's often dismissed as, soft skills.
Right.
But it has profound, scientifically backed consequences for a skill that so many of us are constantly trying to improve: English proficiency.
Okay, let's unpack this with a feeling that I think almost everyone can relate to. If you're learning English or you use it professionally, you know that feeling of flow.
Mm-hmm.
You're at home, you're relaxed, maybe you're talking to a friend, and the words just come. You feel smart, you feel capable.
But then you step into a high-stakes scenario. Maybe it's that crucial job interview.
Or a big presentation.
Or even just a challenging exam.
Right.
And suddenly, all that fluency, it just vanishes. Your mind goes completely blank.
Yep. Yeah, simple words that you know, they just escape you. And you find yourself stumbling over a grammar rule you mastered months, maybe even years ago.
And that's not a knowledge deficit. It's a performance collapse. And it's rooted entirely in your mood.
For decades, the traditional advice has focused almost exclusively on the academic side of things.
Right, more grammar drills, more vocabulary lists.
More hours of practice, just assuming that proficiency is purely a function of how many hours you put in.
But the revelation, and this is really the core mission of our deep dive today, is that recent research spanning neuroscience and psycholinguistics, it reveals this powerful, often overlooked truth.
What's that?
We have concrete evidence proving that your mood and your emotional well-being impact your English performance just as much, if not more, than your study habits do.
That's a revolutionary idea for a lot of learners, I think. We're not just talking about feeling slightly better while you study.
No.
We're talking about your verifiable, measurable cognitive capacity. So today, we are diving into the science, the stories, and the practical toolkit for harnessing your emotions to achieve confident, spontaneous communication.
Exactly. The core finding here for you is that emotional mastery is actually the shortest route. It's the most efficient shortcut to unlocking the knowledge you already have.
So you don't necessarily need more knowledge.
You just need better access to the knowledge that's already in your head.
Okay, so let's stop treating this as just, motivation. Let's establish the scientific why right now.
Yeah.
What is actually happening inside our brains when we shift from calm confidence to total panic?
What's so fascinating here is that the separation we often create between rational thought, which is where we think language resides,
Right, the logical part.
and what we sometimes see as irrational feeling or emotion, that separation just doesn't exist in the brain. Functionally, they are completely intertwined.
So emotions and language share these deep neurological roots.
They do.
That concept is powerful. It implies that if you try to pull on the linguistic root, the emotional system is going to react. So where do these roots connect?
They connect immediately in the survival and memory processing centers of the brain. We're talking specifically about the amygdala.
Which is often called the brain's emotion center.
That's the one. But the amygdala isn't just for registering fear. It's directly linked to the hippocampus, which handles memory, and the entire prefrontal cortex, which controls our decision-making and our language articulation.
So if the amygdala is activated by a perceived threat like, say, the threat of embarrassment in an interview, it prioritizes survival over complex thought.
Precisely. If the amygdala is signaling high distress, it immediately triggers that fight, flight, or freeze response.
And when that happens,
It sends a cascade of signals that essentially hijack the resources that would otherwise be dedicated to focused linguistic functions.
like what specifically?
Like choosing the right word, or putting together a complex sentence, or articulating an idea quickly. Your brain literally dedicates all of its available energy to dealing with the emotional threat, and it deprioritizes everything else.
So that moment when the words feel stuck, when you know the word but you just can't retrieve it, that's a chemical and neurological triage operation.
Yes.
It's not a lack of effort or intelligence. It's your brain deciding, I don't have time for fancy adjectives right now. I need to survive this social situation.
That is the perfect way to describe it. And this leads us directly to the primary mechanism here, which is changes in brain chemistry. Those changes, caused by stress or anxiety, directly affect your cognitive capacity for focusing and remembering.
Okay, let's dig into those chemical shifts, starting with the big one. The stress response and that infamous hormone, cortisol. Is stress always a bad thing?
Well, this is the critical duality we need to understand. Cortisol isn't strictly the villain of the story.
Oh, interesting.
When you're under mild pressure, like, say, you're studying for a test or preparing notes for a meeting, your body releases a moderate amount of cortisol.
And what does that moderate amount actually do for us?
It actually sharpens your focus. It heightens your attention and your memory encoding capacity.
So it's useful.
It's incredibly useful for technical tasks, like ensuring your grammar is perfect in a written exam, or memorizing a list of irregular verbs. It tells the brain, hey, this information is important, pay attention.
But there's a tipping point, isn't there, where the pressure becomes just debilitating.
Absolutely. Too much cortisol, especially when it's sustained over time or released in a big spike of panic, severely impairs the most critical functions you need for fluency.
We're talking about executive function.
Yes, the ability to monitor your own output, to switch between different registers, say from formal to casual, and most critically, the ability to self-correct in real time. All of that goes out the window.
So when we talk about real life examples, like a student freezing in an exam, it wasn't just them forgetting a word.
Yeah.
It was losing the ability to actively manage their own complex linguistic system.
Exactly. That's why people freeze. The pathway between the stored word in your mouth is basically blocked because the system is just overloaded by the stress signal. The brain prioritizes a basic threat response over complex retrieval.
That explains the paralysis perfectly. Now let's contrast that. Let's flip it. What about the positive mood advantage? What happens when we're happy, excited, relaxed, or just curious?
That's where we bring in the brain's built-in reward system, which is driven by dopamine.
The feel-good neurotransmitter.
Right. But its role in language learning goes way beyond just feeling good. It's intrinsically linked to motivation, to reinforcement, and to efficient learning.
So if I'm excited about finally understanding a tricky grammar point, my brain is literally rewarding me for that successful attempt.
It is. And that reward signal is crucial because it reinforces the neural pathways you just used. Study after study shows that learners in a positive emotional state process language more efficiently.
So they don't just feel better.
They actively remember new vocabulary better, and they're just more confident and willing to speak spontaneously.
How does dopamine specifically help with, say, complex language structures?
Think of dopamine as like oil on a neurological highway. It makes everything run smoother.
Okay.
So this open highway allows complex, effortful processes to happen more easily. Using idioms, maintaining a consistent high register, tackling tricky pronunciation. That's not just about repetition. It's about the brain being willing to invest the cognitive energy to do it.
And dopamine provides the motivation for that investment.
It provides the motivation and the cognitive lubrication for that retrieval to happen freely and without that feeling of friction.
That is the ultimate aha moment, I think. English proficiency isn't just about stacking knowledge into your brain.
Not at all.
It's about creating the optimal chemical and neurological capacity to access and execute that knowledge when you need it most.
Now you've got it. That's
Okay.
the key.
All right, so moving from the microscopic level of neurotransmitters, let's look at how this plays out in academic theory and, observable reality.
The key conceptual framework here, the one that really revolutionized language teaching, places emotion at the absolute center of acquisition. It's called the effective filter hypothesis.
Formulated by Stephen Krashen. This is a big one.
It is. It's crucial because it perfectly explains the observed reality of how our mood controls our ability to learn. It gives us a metaphor for that psychological barrier we all put up.
So how exactly does this effective filter operate? Is it literally like blocking sound?
Not sound, but input acquisition. Think of it like a psychological gatekeeper or a shield.
Okay.
When negative emotions, fear, anxiety, self-consciousness are dominant, the filter is raised high. And this raised filter physically blocks language input from reaching the deep learning centers of your brain.
So you might hear the English, you might even consciously understand the grammar point, but because of that high emotional barrier, it just doesn't sink in.
It doesn't get processed for deep, long-term acquisition. It just sort of bounces off.
So if I'm sitting in a class terrified of being called on, I'm kind of wasting my time on some level.
You are?
Even if the teacher is delivering perfect information, my fear is filtering it out before it can become part of my spontaneous language system.
Precisely. Your working memory is using all its resources to manage the emotional threat, leaving nothing left over for genuine learning.
And conversely.
Conversely, positive feelings, safety, joy, encouragement, they lower this effective filter. And when the filter is down, the brain is open. It allows you to absorb the language fully, integrate it without self-judgment, and feel comfortable taking risks.
What specific English skills get blocked when that filter is high?
It specifically blocks complex, nuanced skills. You might understand a simple statement, but your ability to formulate a complex conditional sentence.
With perfect tense agreement.
Or use a nuanced phrasal verb that requires a bit of creativity. That is severely blocked. Your brain defaults to simple, safe language, even if you know the more advanced structures.
And the source material gives us some hard data to back this up. This isn't just theory.
Absolutely not. One of the most telling studies came from the University of Chicago back in 2012.
What did they find?
They found that students speaking a foreign language under high pressure made a staggering 25% more errors than when they were doing the exact same tasks in a calm state.
25%. Let's just pause on that number. That's not a small difference.
It's huge.
That's the difference between a high pass and a low pass on an exam.
Oh.
Or between securing a business deal and not.
Mm-hmm.
And that drop is purely due to the emotional environment, not their knowledge.
It forces us to completely reevaluate how we prioritize study. If stress can cost you a quarter of your performance, then stress management is a study skill.
That's a great point.
And Cambridge English research confirms the other side of this. They found that learners who feel safe and valued in their classrooms gain confidence dramatically faster and participate far more actively.
So that feeling of safety is scientifically a precondition for high-level progress.
It is.
Let's make this science really concrete by looking at those 3 real-life scenarios you mentioned. They illustrate this perfectly. Let's start with Anna, the advanced student preparing for her high-stakes speaking exam.
Anna represents the classic failure of emotional regulation. Academically, she was fully prepared.
She'd put in the hours.
Months of dedicated study. Her practice answers were smooth, complex, sophisticated, but the exam room itself, that formalized, judgmental environment, was the threat trigger for her brain.
So the nerves hit, triggering that soul cortisol response. The effective filter just shot straight up.
And her mind froze. She lost access to her sophisticated vocabulary. She made simple errors and got a result that was nowhere near her actual ability.
Her knowledge was stored perfectly. Her brain just refused to retrieve it under threat.
Exactly. Now contrast that with Hassan's experience, a complete opposite case that shows the power of positive emotion.
He was a beginner who joined a conversation club.
Right, and he wasn't there for academic study. He was there purely out of social curiosity and a desire to, have some fun.
And the atmosphere was characterized by joy. Low stakes, laughter, encouragement, games.
No one was evaluating him. He was just connecting with people. And that environment completely neutralized his effective filter. He became so engaged and comfortable that he forgot his own anxiety.
So he just spoke.
He spent an hour speaking English spontaneously. He made mistakes, of course, but he was communicating ideas, and he left feeling energized, totally surprised by his own fluency. The safe, joyful atmosphere enabled fluency.
And finally, Elena's breakthrough. This one applies directly to anyone using English in a professional context. She was a business professional who felt just exhausted and inadequate in meetings.
Her initial problem wasn't a lack of English, it was a state of chronic insecurity. When her brain felt inadequate, it produced the same effects as high anxiety, hesitation, second-guessing, poor retrieval.
And her solution wasn't more academic study.
No, her shift was a targeted internal change. She started practicing mindfulness, deep breathing before meetings, and positive self-talk.
Literally telling herself, I belong at this table, my ideas are valuable.
And this strategic psychological intervention began to shift her internal chemistry away from chronic cortisol. And slowly, she noticed her English improving because her existing vocabulary was suddenly accessible.
And her colleagues noticed too.
They did. They started listening more closely because her newfound calm and confidence allowed her ideas to be articulated clearly without that barrier of hesitation.
These stories really prove that the emotional environment, both external, like Hassan's club, and internal, like Elena's self-talk, is the silent engine driving your performance.
It determines whether your knowledge is accessible or locked away.
Okay, so since mood isn't just a simple binary of good or bad, we need to get more granular.
Yes, this section is all about mapping the emotional landscape, understanding the precise mechanics of how different feelings affect our cognitive processes, and ultimately our language output.
That detailed mapping is essential because it moves us past just, hoping for a better mood to actively understanding and managing specific emotional states.
Exactly. Let's start with the most common fluency killer, the high arousal negative state. Anxiety and fear. What are the specific English symptoms of this?
The symptoms are highly disruptive. You've got that pronounced hesitation, the dreaded blank mind, where a word just vanishes.
Self-censorship.
Huge self-censorship, yeah. Starting a sentence and then stopping yourself halfway through. And a surprising increase in simple grammar mistakes, even on rules inside and out.
And this happens because anxiety is an attention hog. It severely narrows your attention. Instead of focusing on your message, most of your cognitive power is consumed by internal threat assessment.
Right. You're thinking, am I pronouncing this correctly? Will they judge me? Did I just use the wrong preposition?
That intense internal monitoring prompts the second guessing, and it actively inhibits the creativity you need for spontaneous, fluent language.
So the English outcome is that your words feel locked. You revert to the simplest possible sentence structure, or you just stop participating altogether.
It's a retrieval failure of knowledge that is perfectly fine in your long-term memory.
Okay, moving to the next negative state, frustration and anger. This is often triggered when you're trying to master something and you keep failing.
Yes, like a tricky pronunciation or a complex verb conjugation.
Yeah.
The symptoms here include impatience, intense negative self-talk, I'm never going to get this, and a rapid loss of motivation.
You want to throw the book across the room.
You do. And frustration is a unique kind of negative arousal. Initially, a mild level can create focus to solve the problem, but if it tips over into real anger, it derails the whole process.
And so?
Your emotional energy gets spent arguing with yourself about your failure rather than on the deliberate processing you need to communicate or learn.
And the practical English outcome. Mistakes increase because of carelessness, fluency drops off a cliff,
Yeah.
and you just revert to simple, sloppy language, and you become less willing to participate again in the future.
It feeds the cycle. Now let's consider the quiet killer, the low arousal negative state, sadness or low mood.
This doesn't look like panic, but it's just as debilitating for learning.
For sure, symptoms are low energy, obviously, but also a significantly slowed recall speed and a poor working memory capacity. You struggle to hold on to corrections or multi-part instructions.
What's the chemistry behind that?
It involves lower levels of key neurotransmitters, which reduces overall engagement. Learning complex language requires a lot of mental effort, and a low mood just removes your willingness to expend that energy.
So the English outcome is minimal output, passive participation, zero spontaneity. You become a listener only, even if you plan to contribute.
And that lack of engagement just reinforces the low mood.
Okay, let's pivot. Let's talk about the states we actually want to cultivate. First, the positive high energy state, joy and curiosity.
This is the Hassan effect we talked about.
The symptoms are visible. High energy for conversation, an eagerness to try new vocabulary, and creative, inventive language use. You're willing to take risks.
This positive mood state, fueled by dopamine, literally opens the brain to new input. It encourages that necessary risk-taking, the willingness to try a complex phrase even if you aren't 100% sure it's perfect.
And that's where rapid, spontaneous learning happens.
because the brain associates the effort with a reward. So the English outcome is increased fluency, excellent memory encoding for new phrases, and a huge willingness to interact again in the future. Joy creates a positive feedback loop.
But if we're looking for the absolute optimal state for long-term acquisition and retention, it's not actually high-octane joy.
No, it's the low arousal positive state, calm and relaxation.
What are the specific cognitive markers of this state?
Steady focus, patience with yourself and others, and most importantly, a willingness to listen and process information deeply without that internal pressure to respond perfectly right away.
This is the state where the amygdala is totally quiet. It's signaling safe to the rest of the brain.
And when the brain signals safety, your cognitive capacity is maximized for deep work. These safe emotions foster the optimal state for long-term language acquisition.
So the English outcome here is greater comprehension, accurate self-correction abilities,
Because you can take feedback without feeling personally judged.
and the ability to have rich, meaningful conversations without mental burnout. If you want to integrate difficult concepts, this calm state is where that happens.
This is the state we should be aiming for most often in our structured practice.
The crucial takeaway from that mapping, then, is that your mood isn't just some random occurrence or a fault in your personality.
No, it's shaped by specific, controllable, and often preventable triggers.
And that realization is a critical psychological step towards mastery. So many people think, oh, I woke up in a bad mood, so my English practice is ruined today.
But in reality, your mood is a highly flexible state. It's shaped by your environment, your habits, your social interactions, and most powerfully, your internal dialogue.
Let's break down some of these common triggers from the research, starting with the simplest one: preparation.
Simple, deliberate readiness significantly lowers anticipatory nerves. If you know you've reviewed the material, even for just 10 minutes, that small feeling of competence can override the feeling of panic.
Preparation is basically a tool to reduce uncertainty, which is the fuel for anxiety.
Exactly. And the social environment is massive. We talked about it with the affective filter, teacher and peer attitude.
Supportive, encouraging environments are just vital for confidence.
If you're in a learning space where mistakes are ridiculed, your affective filter will be permanently high. A positive attitude from peers or a guide is basically a catalyst for dopamine release. It signals safety.
And we can't escape our history. Past experiences, both good and bad, heavily shape our current emotional reactions.
For sure. If the last time you spoke English in public, you stumbled and felt embarrassed, your amygdala will flood you with anxiety the next time, whether it's warranted or not.
But the opposite is also true.
The opposite is equally true. Celebrating a past win, no matter how small, cues your brain to expect another positive outcome, which reduces the stress response before it even starts.
And we often overlook the most basic thing that dictates our mental state, our physical state.
We have to underscore the basics. Hunger, lack of sleep, lack of exercise. They all demonstrably shift your mood negatively. If you're hungry, your body is producing stress hormones. If you're underslept, your prefrontal cortex is already operating at a deficit.
Can you elaborate on that sleep connection? Why is getting enough sleep before an English test more important than cramming for 2 more hours?
It comes down to memory consolidation. During deep sleep, your brain actively works to stabilize and strengthen the neural connections you formed during the day.
So it's filing away the information.
It's moving vocabulary and grammar rules from your temporary working memory to stable long-term storage. If you cram and skip sleep, that information stays volatile and is easily lost under stress. You can't expect optimal performance from a brain running on fumes.
And finally, the internal environment, mindset or self-talk.
This is maybe the most powerful trigger of all. The thoughts you allow to loop in your head, believing you can or can't, sets a deeply powerful, self-fulfilling prophecy.
If you walk into a meeting convinced you'll fail.
The anxiety that creates will ensure you perform poorly, which just reinforces the initial negative belief. It's a vicious cycle. Your internal dialogue is either your greatest coach or your worst saboteur.
This brings us to the pro tip for you, the listener. You have to become a detective of your own mood.
Yes.
You need to actively reflect, not just on your mistakes, but on the conditions of your performance. Ask what usually triggers a good English day versus a bad one for you.
That reflection time is non-negotiable. Is it always bad after lunch? Is it always bad when you speak to a certain person? Identifying the precise trigger is 80% of the solution because it moves you from being a passive victim of your mood to an active manager of your state.
Okay, we've established the why, the neuroscience, and we've mapped the emotional states. Now we get to the core value of this deep dive, the how.
The practical toolkit. We have 8 actionable strategies for mastering your mood and achieving real, tangible improvements in your English performance.
And these aren't just feel-good exercises.
No, these are honed by high achievers because they bypass the need for endless academic study by optimizing your access to the knowledge you already have.
Let's start with strategy number 1, emotional awareness. Name it to tame it.
This is the bedrock of emotional intelligence. When you feel a shift in your mood, that pit in your stomach, your heart rate speeding up, you have to pause and label the emotion specifically.
Am I anxious? Am I frustrated? Am I just tired?
Yes, but how does just labeling it help? Doesn't focusing on the fear make it worse?
That's a great question.
Actually, it's the opposite. Labeling creates distance. When you say, I am angry, you're trapped inside the emotion. But when you say, I observe that I'm feeling anger, you create a space between the emotion and your identity.
It puts your rational brain back in control.
It allows the prefrontal cortex to regain control from the amygdala. You move from reaction to management.
The specific exercise for this is great. Before your next English session, check in with yourself. Ask, what am I feeling right now? And how might this help or hurt my performance?
That shift from passive feeling to active management is key. Next up, preparation rituals. Build calm and confidence.
This is about creating a habit loop that signals safety before the pressure hits. What are some specific, repeatable rituals we can use?
Simple things that take less than 5 minutes. Deep breathing for 1 minute while you review one small success from yesterday.
I like that.
Listening to a favorite song that boosts your mood. Or setting a positive intention. Instead of, I must not make mistakes, you say, today I will focus on connection.
So the ritual itself becomes a trigger for your brain, signaling it's time to learn safely, and it lowers that affective filter.
Strategy 3, visualization. Rehearse success.
This is about priming your brain for success. It's so effective because it activates the same neural pathways as the actual performance.
You convince the brain you've already succeeded, which dramatically reduces the anxiety.
So for this to work, it needs to be detailed and sensory. It's not just a vague hope.
Right. Let's walk through it. Close your eyes. Inhale deeply. Picture yourself walking into the conversation with a calm, positive expression. Then you need to imagine the words coming easily. Feel the smooth rhythm of your speech.
And most important, hear yourself responding clearly, maybe even laughing confidently. You're building a memory of success before the event even begins.
Okay, but what if panic hits mid-performance? You need an emergency reset button. That brings us to number 4, mindful breathing and grounding.
Specifically, box breathing. But how practical is this when you're already in an interview and panicking?
It works precisely because it's physiological. Box breathing immediately targets the vagus nerve and interrupts the amygdala's stress signal. By regulating your breath, you signal to your body that there's no real danger.
It overrides the cortisol spike.
It's a quick, necessary physiological reset.
And the steps are simple. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4.
And you can do this discreetly while looking down at your notes. It physically slows a racing mind and boosts focus.
All right, strategy number 5 is the hardest, but maybe the most transformative. Positive self-talk. Rewire the inner critic.
Our inner critic is relentless. It uses words like always and never. I'm always terrible at pronunciation. We have to actively replace those thoughts.
So instead of I always make mistakes, we replace it with something constructive like learning means making mistakes. My effort is more important than perfection.
Or even just I can handle this. The actionable tip here requires consistency. Write down 3 positive statements about your English every single morning. That repetition is how you reprogram the brain.
Strategy 6 shifts the focus from internal to external. Environment and support. Choose encouragement.
You have to be intentional about the spaces you inhabit, online and offline. Surround yourself with people who celebrate effort. A kind correction or a simple laugh goes so much further than harsh judgment.
If the environment you're in is toxic or judgmental, your English will stall no matter how many hours you study.
Because your effective filter will stay permanently up.
Number 7, celebrate progress, not perfection. This is to combat that crippling perfectionism.
Every conversation, even a flawed one, is a step forward. If we only reflect on our mistakes, we reinforce that negative emotional cycle.
We need to radically shift our reflection habits.
So instead of just dwelling on what you missed, actively reflect on what went well, however small. Did you use a new idiom? Did you understand a complex joke? Name those wins to reinforce the positive mood.
And finally, strategy 8 brings us back to the body. Physical well-being. Fuel your brain.
We can't underestimate the basics. Eat healthy foods that stabilize your blood sugar. Be mindful of caffeine. Too much can easily raise anxiety levels.
Prioritize sleep for memory consolidation.
And critically, use exercise. Even a light walk before a stressful English session can boost your mood and mental clarity. A balanced, rested, and nourished body is the absolute precondition for optimal linguistic performance.
Now we need to broaden our scope beyond just the individual learner. It's also about the environments we create and inhabit.
Yes, this brings us to classroom and workplace insights. If you're a teacher or a leader, your role is pivotal in fostering emotionally friendly spaces. The biggest step is to model vulnerability.
What does that look like in practice?
It means admitting your own language challenges or your own mistakes. It shows that struggling is normal and human, which immediately creates a safer emotional container for everyone else.
Another key action is framing mistakes positively, using a mantra like, mistakes are evidence you're trying something new.
Exactly. It shifts the perception of error from failure to necessary risk-taking. You also have to recognize effort, not just output. Silent participants might be listening and learning intensely.
And encouraging humor and play. Laughter inherently lowers stress.
And for you, the learner, the key advice here is to advocate for yourself. If you're feeling nervous, just say so. You might say, please forgive my hesitation, I'm a little anxious today. Most people are far more supportive than you expect.
The emotional landscape is also shifting dramatically because of technology. We have to address the unique challenges of digital age emotions.
The first factor is isolation. Solo learning on an app can increase anxiety because there's no immediate human feedback to reassure you. The remedy is to actively seek out interactive online communities.
Then there's the very real phenomenon of screen fatigue. Too much screen time saps focus and energy. You have to mandate breaks away from the screen.
And the nature of digital feedback loops is complex. Online platforms give immediate correction, which can be great, but constantly getting error flags marked in bright red can be intensely stressful. It's criticism without any human warmth.
This extends to AI and language tools.
Yeah.
You have to choose tools that encourage you, not just penalize your errors.
Finally, we need to acknowledge that this emotional journey is highly individual. It depends heavily on personal diversity. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right. Emotional responses are shaped by so many unique factors. Cultural differences are massive.
Some cultures encourage restraint, others encourage open debate. They require completely different emotional strategies for success in English.
And the same goes for personality. Introverts and extroverts process emotional energy differently.
An extrovert might find their optimal state in a loud group conversation. An introvert might need a quiet one-on-one dialogue. You have to honor that difference.
And we must be mindful of neurodiversity. Learners with conditions like ADHD or anxiety may require highly tailored emotional strategies.
Their baseline for regulation is different, and they may need to prioritize things like box breathing and preparation rituals even more rigorously.
So the conclusion here is permission giving.
Exactly. Honor your own temperament and unique needs. There is no one correct emotional state for learning, only the optimal state that allows you to access your best knowledge.
Fluency isn't about becoming some generic perfect speaker. It's about becoming the best, most confident, and most emotionally regulated version of yourself in English.
This has been a really deep and revealing dive into the hidden power of emotion in language mastery. Let's quickly recap the 5 most powerful lessons we've uncovered today.
First, your mood powerfully shapes your English performance, often more than study time alone. It dictates your chemical access to the knowledge you already have.
Second, negative emotional states like anxiety physically block memory retrieval and fluency, but there are manageable chemical states, not personal failings.
Third, positive states, joy, curiosity, and especially relaxation, open the brain to risk-taking, efficient memory encoding, and the integration of new complex language.
Fourth, simple, consistent rituals like brief breathing exercises, positive self-talk, and celebrating small wins can dramatically transform your emotional state and your performance capacity almost instantly.
And finally, fifth, supportive environments, both offline with kind peers and online with encouraging tools, are absolutely key to achieving lasting progress and keeping that effective filter down.
And remember, learning to manage your emotions isn't just for better English. The calm, confidence, and curiosity you practice here are essential life skills for thriving in work and relationships in any language.
Indeed. It requires immense courage and a willingness to be kind to yourself. And here's the final provocative thought to carry with you.
Next time your words stumble or your ideas shine, remember that you are not just acquiring English vocabulary or grammar, you are actively building and strengthening emotional regulatory skills.
So how will you embrace your next difficult mood and transform it not into a frustrating roadblock, but into your greatest language learning ally, using the tools of self-compassion and neuroscience?
That is the real challenge and the ultimate reward.